Hello, and welcome to another issue of the Numbers of Thoth. Brought to you today by Martin and Julia Herdman. Today, we're looking into ancient Egyptian astronomy and the role of the Astrologer Priests. Both the priesthood and the knowledge of the heavens were the domain of the ancient Egyptian god of knowledge and wisdom, Thoth. Everything was created by the utterances of Thoth. He was the governor of years, the computer of the time of life, the governor of the living star gods, the white disk, who made the night beautiful, and the unhurried but never-resting bull of heaven. The night sky was the domain of Thoth and the intellectual territory of his astrologer priests. The Greco-Egyptian bishop, Clement of Alexandria, describes the astrologer priest as carrying a horologe, a device for measuring time, and a palm frond, in the temple procession at Alexandria. These were the time instruments used to monitor the celestial objects of the stars, the sun and the moon. The device carried by the astrologer could have been the bowl of a water clock or a sundial. The palm frond is used in one of two ways. Firstly, it symbolized a lifespan of millions of years. Secondly, it appears in images of surveyors using an instrument called a merkit, a fixed plumb bob on a holder. The plumb bob was aligned using a staff with a cleft in it or the center rib of a palm leaf. The primary duty of the astrologer priest was to learn the 4 astrological books of Thoth. The 4 books concerned the visible fixed stars that circulated the northern pole and the conjunctions and luminations of the sun and moon, together with their risings. One of the 4 books the astrologer may have been acquainted with was a catalogue of the universe composed around 1100 BC by a scribe of the sacred books in the House of Life called Amenhotep. The book was a compendium of all that the sun god Ra shone upon all the earth and all that was known in the heavens. It listed 5 constellations, only 2 of which can be certainly identified today, Orion and the Plough or the Big Dipper. Surprisingly, there is no mention of Sothis, nor are the planets enumerated. Academics reckon the ancient Egyptians knew about 43 of the constellations in the universe around the time of the 13th century BC. That is about half the constellations known by modern astronomers. The astrologers were the keepers of the calendar and set the days of feasting and festivals. They divided the year into lucky, neutral, and unlucky days. Only in the last epochs of the Egyptian civilization was the astrologer priest engaged in casting what we would call horoscopes, showing that a person's destiny could be linked to the day of their birth. For most of ancient Egyptian history, the astrologer's role was concerned with monitoring the regular cycles of the heavens and, in particular, tracking the progress of the descent stars. The 36 groups of stars or small constellations were observed to count the hours of the night in the temple. Egyptologists are right when they say the temple priests used the water clocks to tell them when to perform their rituals. Those priests who did not have the luxury of a water clock in their temple used the decans to track the hours of the night. The 36 groups of stars or constellations rose consecutively on the horizon throughout the year. These constellations differed from those developed by the Mesopotamians and Greeks. Decans are known to have been used from at least the 9th or 10th dynasty, but they were probably used centuries before that. The Egyptians discovered that certain groups of stars would rise in succession every night on a given month of the year. By paying attention to the position of these star clusters, they could monitor the progress of the night and tell which hour they were in. Star clusters or asterisms like those used by the ancient Egyptians were used to measure the hours of darkness until the Renaissance in Europe, when astrology and magic eventually fell out of favor and the mechanical calculation of time took over. Archaeoastronomer Sarah Simmons, who has done extensive work on the decans, says that these clocks consist of a table with 12 rows representing the hours of the night and 36 columns representing the 36 decades or 10-day periods that make up the 12 months of the 360-day year. The 5 extra days that make the calendar 365 days long appear in their own column, suggesting that they were always considered outside normal or sacred time. Some of the 36 groups of stars have been identified, but not all of them, meaning that they are by no means obvious or easy to find. Researchers found a star map in the tomb of Queen Hatshepsut's vizier Senenmut. Senenmut was a priest who set the calendars, a tutor, a government official, and an architect at her court. The tomb of Senenmut was discovered during the 1925 to 1927 excavations directed by Herbert Winleck for the Egyptian expedition of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The unfinished tomb is entered via a steep stairway starting in a quarry. This is 90 meters long and gives access to 3 successive chambers under the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut. Chamber A is 10 by 12 feet and has 2 decorated panels now known as the Egyptian celestial diagram. The celestial diagram depicts the northern and southern skies. The map on the southern panel could well reflect specific planetary conjunctions in 1534 BC, the time of the tomb's construction. The 4 planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, and Venus, are relatively easily recognizable, but Mars is missing. Probably, because Mars was retrograde at the time. The ancient Egyptians called Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn the morning and evening stars. Mars was called the red star, Jupiter the sparkling star, and Saturn the bull star. The most significant constellations were Sar, Sopdet and Mysekeu, or Ursa Major. Today, we call Sar Orion and Sopdet Sirius. Orion was connected with the god Osiris and Sirius with the goddess Isis. Ursa Major, or the Great Bear, was described by Plutarch as the spirit of Typhon, meaning the spirit of the ancient Egyptian god of chaos Set, represented by a male hippopotamus. Although Senenmut's tomb was unfinished and has suffered much damage over the centuries since its creation, its ceiling has yielded a wealth of information about the state of ancient Egyptian astronomy, chronology, mythology, and religion in the New Kingdom. The astronomical scenes at Senenmut's tomb appear on 2 levels or 2 registers, one above the other. The upper register is separated by vertical lines into 36 sections reflecting the 36 decanal stars. Likewise, the lower level depicted the 12 months of the year in 12 circles, subdivided into 24 units, most likely representing the hours of the day. For millennia, the astrologer priests watched the boundless heavens, monitoring the movement of its celestial bodies, the sun by day and the moon and stars by night. Using this information, they tracked and regulated time using the tiny pinpoints of light of variable brightness that appeared in the night sky. The brightest appeared on the horizon after sunset, and the less illustrious appeared with the darkness, moving from the east to the west with the transit of the moon. The heavens were there linked to time and the mysteries of the cosmos, to the gods and the afterlife. They believed the sky was divided into northern and southern hemispheres. The northern hemisphere was the place of the imperishable stars and the home of the gods. In the pyramid texts, we can read about a journey of the deceased king into heaven, which is assumed to be somewhere in the higher sky. The texts describe the journey in detail, showing the crossing of a winding canal, the winding lake, the lily lake or the meandering stream. It was imagined to be the boundary between the changing and unchanging world, and to cross it was to enter into a celestial paradise called the Field of Offerings. In pyramid texts, 818 C and 1000 CD Thoth in the form of an ibis is called to ferry the deceased king in the form of the Eye of Horus across the winding waterway. The Eye of Horus leapt up and fell on Thoth's wing, and Thoth carried it across the winding waterway to the other side. The winding waterway was probably the great crescent of stars that drape across the night sky called the Milky Way. In the winter skies, it appears as a rather narrow ribbon that rises upright from the northern horizon and passes nearly overhead, then, like a river lighted by flaming beacons flanking either shore, it flows southward until it drops behind the Earth just below the great star Sirius. In the evening skies of springtime, the Milky Way almost disappears from view. It can only be seen in the north, and on sparkling clear nights where there is a clean sweep all along the northern horizon. In summer, and particularly in the month of August, the Milky Way is at its best. It can be clearly seen in all its glory. Using the description of the winding canal, one can see the following similarities between the Milky Way and the winding waterway. The pole star, which is assumed to be imperishable, lies on the northern side of the Milky Way. There are clusters along the northern side that could be interpreted as places or cities, or perhaps the field of offering. During the night, the Milky Way can be seen as a flowing stream running from north to south or from south to north. And, when the sun rises, the Milky Way disappears from sight because of the brightness of the sunlight. This could have been interpreted as the sun god ray not crossing into the northern hemisphere. We'll cover why the sun god ray cannot cross into the territory of eternity in another film. Until then, the astronomical observations and knowledge conducted by the priests of Thoth were an important part of the old Egyptian civilization. The astronomical knowledge was so high and developed that they could follow the positions of the stars and their regular movements. But, Egyptian astronomy was not to achieve a mathematically detailed description of very complex relationships between the celestial bodies. Instead, the sky and the setting and rising of the stars were connected with the religious myths and the transit from this life to the next. If you would like to learn more about the ancient Egyptians and the domains of the god Thoth, don't forget to subscribe. Please hit the like button if you have enjoyed this video or found it useful. Until next time, goodbye and thank you for listening.